welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is the MLB DFS Core Pick video for today, Friday, May 31st, if you're joining me for the very first time. First of all, welcome in. Second of all, this is how today's video will be structured. We'll be going over a recap of yesterday's picks, seeing how they ultimately ended up. After that, we'll get moved over to RotoWire, talk about any game that does have a double-digit chance of rain for today overall. Then after that, we'll get moved over to FanDuel, talk about my core picks, which is going to be one pitcher and four hitters. That's going to be based on a combination of past performance versus their respective opponent, as well as some recent history. And then after that, we'll get moved over to my cheat sheet and talk about my top GPP teams to stack for tonight's slate overall. That cheat sheet is 100% free and it is up on the Sports Affiliation website, so definitely be sure to check that out as you're building out your lineups tonight. But without further ado, we'll get started with a recap of yesterday's picks. So we're going to start off at the pitcher position with Nick Pivetta, $8,800. Got to 37 points. He was a hit. He was the second overall pitcher on yesterday's slate, so can't really complain about him. Very good start overall. And then at catcher, we had Connor Wong, $2,700. Was 2 for 2 versus Ryan Flaherty in his career previously. Unfortunately, got to 0 points yesterday, so he was a mess. He ultimately ended up going 0 for 3 in that game. And then at second base, I also believe you could play him at shortstop and third base as well. Luis Rengifo of the Angels. And he was $3,200. Only got 6.2 points, so I did give him a miss yesterday. 0 for 3, 1 run scored and a walk. Just not quite what we were looking for out of him. Obviously, we'd like to see at least 9 points or double-digit points out of him when you're talking over $3,000. And then in the outfield, we had Juan Soto, $4,400, got 28.7. He was a hit. He ultimately ended up being the top outfielder on yesterday's slate. And then lastly, we had Taylor Ward, $3,000, got to 9.2 points. So I did ultimately end up giving him a push. Obviously, we would like to see double-digit points out of him, but he went 1 for 3 with a run scored and a walk. So not a bad day for him whatsoever. So if you look at kind of everything in totality, it wasn't too bad. We got the top outfielder. We got a second-best pitcher. If you had some other decent plays alongside this, you still had a decent chance on cashing yesterday. Runs were pretty hard to come by on yesterday's slate just in general, so hopefully you got to some of those hitters that did do a little bit better on yesterday's slate. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to RotoWire and talk about the weather report for today. So it is a 13-game main slate, and the good news is we only have one game with a chance of rain at this point in time. That's down in Kansas City between the Royals and the Padres, 38% chance of rain there. If anything else does majorly change for this game or any other game throughout the day, we'll leave it listed down in the comments below. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to FanDuel and talk about my core picks for tonight's slate. So once again, it is going to be a combination of past history versus their respective opponent, as well as some recent history. So we're going to start off at the pitcher position with Jose Berrios. Keep in mind, 13-game main slate, lots of good pitching options out there. Berrios is just kind of my favorite one overall, but there's probably about 6 or 7 different pitchers you can play on tonight's slate, so feel free to mix and match as you do see fit. But with Jose Berrios, $9,400, averaging just under 33 fantasy points per game. He's pitched really well to start off the year. He's going against the Pittsburgh Pirates tonight, whose offense has kind of stuttered. You know, as of late, he has some pretty good history versus the Pirates. It's a little bit limited history, though. And if we look at what Berrios has done so far in the season, it's 5 wins, ERA under 3 at this point in time at 2.94, and once again, $9,400. So I do like the upside that he does present for tonight's slate overall. Then we're going to move down to first base with Ryan Mountcastle. He's $3,100, averaging just under 10 fantasy points per game. Going against the Tampa Bay Rays and Aaron Savali tonight, if you look at what Mountcastle has done so far on the season, is a .283 average, 6 home runs, 20 RBIs, averaging just under 10 fantasy points per game, once again at $3,100. And if you look at what he's done so far in his career versus Aaron Savali, 5 for 6 with 2 home runs, so some really good upside there. As of late, Mountcastle has at least 1 hit in 7 out of his last games. 3 of those games have been multi-hit games. Unfortunately, no home runs during that stretch, but, you know, trying to change that in a pretty big way versus Aaron Savali tonight, who's been really hit or miss so far this season. And 3 of those games have been double-digit performances. So I do like the upside of Ryan Mountcastle here tonight. You'll see at various times throughout the year he's closer to that $3,400 price range. So if he goes out, starts hitting a couple home runs, he'll probably be back up there in no time. Obviously, you know, with Baltimore moving the fences back, probably a guy that did get hurt by that just a little bit, but do definitely like the matchup for him tonight. Then at second base, we're going to go with Luis Ariz, $2,900, averaging just under 9 fantasy points per game on the season, and he's been really hot since he came over to the Padres. So if you look at what he's done so far in the season, .332 average, 1 home run, which happened not too long ago, 13 RBIs, averaging just under 9 fantasy points per game on the season. Once again, $2,900. Goes against Michael Wacha and the Kansas City Royals tonight. He is 4 for 13 with 2 home runs versus Michael Wacha. A little bit of power there, which you typically don't see out of Luis Ariz, but I don't know that we can expect that fully tonight, but at least nice to know that it's in there in the Michael Wacha matchup. Wacha's pitched pretty well so far this year, though. And then if we look at what Arise has done as of late, 13 out of his last 14 games, he has at least one hit, which includes 9 multi-hit games during that time span, his 1 lone home run on the season, and he has 7 games where he scored at least 9 fantasy points. So if we can get 9 points or more out of him at $2,900, we're going to be pretty happy with his performance overall tonight. And then we're going to keep moving down. This one is going to be third baseman / first baseman Emmanuel Rivera, $2,200. This is one that is a little bit more based on history, so obviously if you don't like this play, you definitely don't have to play it. But once again, he's $2,200. You look at the numbers on the season, it's not great. It's .215 average, 0 home runs, 6 RBIs. He's averaging just under 4 fantasy points per game on the season. Obviously a guy that doesn't play full-time, but is expected to start tonight. And in his career versus Jose Urena, the expected starting pitcher for tonight's game, he's 3 for 7 with 3 home runs. That is probably, the best history of any hitter versus any pitcher tonight. So I'm willing to take a chance on that at $2,200. Decent value play there if he ultimately does end up starting. But if he doesn't, obviously we'll pivot to someone else. But just kind of a shot that I'd like to take based on the history. He has at least 1 hit in 3 out of his last 4 starts. One of those games was a multi-hit game, and 2 of the games have been double-digit performances. So even if we get double-digit performance out of him at $2,200, it's going to look like a pretty good value overall. And then last but not least, we have shortstop Francisco Lindor, $3,100. If you look at what he's done so far in the season, .225 average, 9 home runs, 28 RBIs, averaging just over 10 fantasy points per game at $3,100. A little bit slower to the season for him, kind of in between there. Got off to that slow start, starting to hit it a little bit, got to a slow start again. Seems to be on that hot streak once again, though. He is on a modest 9-game hitting streak. 4 of those games have been multi-hit games, 2 home runs during that time span. And he also has 7 games where he scored at least 9 fantasy points. So a relatively safe floor there. He is 6 for 11 with 1 home run in his career versus Jordan Montgomery. This was a guy initially I was kind of leaving off the list because he did have a swollen finger the other day. I think he got hit on the finger, but he's played both games since then. He's had a hit in both games since then, so I'm not too worried about it. Also includes a 4-for-4 day yesterday. So I like the upside of Francisco Lindor tonight at $3,100. Obviously, if he's going to keep hitting like he has been as of late, he's probably going to be a lot more expensive, probably closer to a $3,500 price range in the very near future. But with that being said, if you go with the 5 players that do currently have listed here, you have $14,300 remaining, just under $3,600 remaining per player. So a lot of room and flexibility to pay up there. Obviously, don't have any outfielders in this core for today, which is typically unusual for me, but it does give you some options and some flexibility to pay up at that position specifically. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to my cheat sheet and talk about my top GPP teams to stack for tonight's slate overall. So once again, the cheat sheet is 100% free. It's up on the Sports Affiliation website. And keep in mind, tonight we got 13 games on the main slate. These are the 4 that do stand out for me the most in terms of top GPP stacks. We got the Texas Rangers going against Sixto Sanchez of the Miami Marlins. Sanchez has made a couple starts now this season. He's not probably all the way fully stretched out. Doesn't have a lot of experience in that starting role. Hasn't been too great either. And the Rangers have never faced him before, but I do like the upside that they could present for him tonight. Then we have the Miami Marlins on the opposite side of that game going against Jose Urena. Urena has a very long career of being a pretty mediocre pitcher. The Marlins have 3 hitters that have faced him before. All 3 have done pretty well versus him. So if you want to get Tim Anderson, Josh Bell, or Emmanuel Rivera, you definitely could do that. Obviously, if you want to take some shot on some other Marlins players, you can. That offense hasn't been too great this season, but this is probably the matchup if you're going to pick one for them. Probably a sneaky play if you want to go that direction. And then we have the Dodgers going against Dakota Hudson. Not a long list of history there in the past, but Dakota Hudson's got like an ERA of almost 6 at this point on the season. So definitely do like the Dodgers once again. Probably going to be a pretty popular stack though. And then last but not least, we have the Baltimore Orioles going against Aaron Savali. Once again, Savali's been pretty hit or miss so far this season. His ERA is like 5.8, I want to say off the top of my head. And there are a lot of Orioles hitters that have hit him really well in the past, including Gunnar Henderson, Ryan Mountcastle, Cedric Mullins. And then also James McCann does have a home run versus him if he ultimately ends up sneaking his way into that starting lineup. So there's some pretty good options out there in terms of teams to stack for tonight's slate overall. Obviously, if you want to go with a different team other than the 4 that are listed here, feel free to do so. Definitely a large 13-game slate once again. But with that being said, that's what I do have in terms of the recap, the weather report, the core picks, and the top GPP teams to stack for tonight's slate. As always, if you have any questions related to MLB DFS, be sure to drop them down in the comments below, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. And then with that being said, I'll be listing any updates, whether it's pitcher getting scratched, weather updates, or anything else like that down in the comments below, as well as the starting lineups as they do get announced throughout the afternoon and early evening. But with that being said, if you are brand new to my channel, checking out for the very first time, or have yet to subscribe, please consider doing so. I definitely would appreciate it. Helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS. Right now we have MLB DFS in terms of the core pick videos Monday through Friday. And then I do post up my UFL DFS video once a week, typically coming out on Friday. So that won't be out later today. Definitely be sure to check that out if that's something you're into as well. And then last but not least, if you're interested in sports betting, if you're interested in prop betting whatsoever, be sure to check out the links and promo codes down in the description below for BetUS, Parlay Play, and Prize Picks. If you're a brand new user on any one of those three sites, when you sign up, make your initial deposit, you will get a first match deposit bonus. For Prize Picks and Parlay Play, it's 100% match up to $100. And then for BetUS, it's 125% match on your initial deposit up to $2,500. So some pretty great opportunities to be had out there. And then with that being said, if you have any other additional questions related to that whatsoever, feel free to reach out to me, whether it's down in the comments or on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport. I'd be more than happy to help you with that journey as well. But with that being said, that's all that I truly have for today's video. Definitely do appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. Definitely means a lot to me. I hope that each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some pretty good luck in MLB DFS tonight.